Start with the pledge.
To wait to
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Start with.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Got a motion by Bo, seconded by Diggs, all in favor. 7-0. Now we just need to entertain a motion. For the consent agenda, if anybody's got any questions, now it's time to pull it out, abstain from what you need to abstain from.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as is.
Motion made by Stephanie Ogle,
I'll second.
seconded by Amanda. All in favor? 7-0. Moving on. Presentations are District Municipal Advisor. Magdalena.
Hi, this is Matt. Please leave your name.
We'll jump back to that too, so I get him on. Maybe on the phone with another school district. I told him 6:15. 6:15? Yeah. I mean, you got 15 minutes, it looks like. Yeah. Is that him? No. No, I'm just gonna say that. He goes here too. So if we're moving on, we'll move on to.
He has the food tonight.
So we'll just do it another time? or
Yep,
what?
we can do it tonight. It's all right.
Okay. So now we're gonna move on to reports. Well, hang on, before we move on, does anybody have any questions about this?
We talking about the budget increase in half?
Yes.
I don't.
I think we went over quite a bit the last time.
Okay. No questions there, so we're moving on. Move on to reports. So first, superintendent.
Good, here we go.
Let her rip.
All right, we got our APR just after our last board meeting in December, it came out. Had to fight a little bit for some points, the kindergarten readiness assessment. Didn't we, Ms. Pettigrew? Yeah, we were not happy about that, because we weren't getting the points that we were supposed to, and we had done it, but we did prove our case, and we did get those points back. There's a statewide distribution there, you can kind of see how those scores came out. Tipton is about dead center. We did go up the number of points, which I expected, because we had a lot of people focusing on this. We went from 70 points, this is the percentage of points earned, 70.2 to 73.9. We did see some increases in the summary of points, 9.6 points overall. Our percentage of overall points were 70.2, so 73.9. If you look down to the categories, without diving down to the subject area and all this stuff, we saw a 3.9% improvement in our performance area. We earned 65% of those points possible. Those are the most difficult to get. Those are the ones looking at growth data, going through some qual metrics that come out of the zoo, and trying to figure out, if you have two test scores, basically, does a kid takes a test in 3rd grade and 4th grade, what the difference is, and then comparing it to the average of all the kids that took it in the state, and seeing what that growth looks like, and comparing us to everybody else, and then deciding how many points we should give for that particular kid. The bad thing is we never see that data and know how a kid, how that racks up. You never see those points. So and you don't know how, we can't scrutinize them to say, is that accurate? You don't get them by student. So we did see a 3.8% improvement in the continuous improvement area. Went to 96.1% of those possible. I think we'll get to 100 probably next year. We had some positive highlights. Continuous improvement plan that we developed got a perfect score. And we we got a rare accommodation, and that's from our DESI state supervisor, said that they had a lot of scores that go through our plans, and he said that the community connections pieces, dealing with the pre-K and connecting with bright futures in our area businesses, was an area to be commended. He said there were very few schools that had anything that rated accommodation. So he wanted to let us know and wanted to pass that along to you all too. Success Ready students, I think that's probably the most, one of the better pieces to look at. Sometimes when you're in the midst of building a kid up and encouraging them and helping them get through school, sometimes it can look a little rocky. Maybe they're not scoring the best on every test all the time. But at the end, we have some college and career ready assessments, some evidence that the kid is ready to go in the workforce, ready to go to a technical school, ready to go to college. And we use the ACT, another assessment, which is an ACT product called WorkKeys. We use the AccuPlacer, and we also use the military's ASVAB. So we were able to receive an on-target rating for that, which is 100% of the points possible for students being ready once they finally leave the school district. So that's a good thing. We're also on target for students graduating on time. In general, the points that we're going to get from here on out, with the exception of maybe a few, that are going to be the tougher ones to get, are those assessment pieces and DESI's assessments. There's a little bit of a challenge with some superintendents and some groups getting together saying, you know, we don't like how this growth data is being calculated. It doesn't seem like it's really giving us a good read. It's making us look like we're not doing anything. And that's not the truth, especially when you look at end results of kids. When you see that they are going on to be successful, and we can do our own follow-up data to know they're being successful because we take into account what they're doing with their life after they leave. I think that's after 6 months, isn't it, Ms. Metter? Is that done through the counseling? Yeah. So we're accounting for the fact that we help them build their future. In other words, whatever that's going to be. For everybody, it's not to go to a four-year college. It might be to go and work their family farm and be a business person. But whatever that is, we have a wide range of futures represented in our kids. So, you know, they're not necessarily going to be the best test takers all the time, but they are literate, they're able to learn, they're able to work with their hands, or they're able to go and be that school teacher that we pull right back into our system pretty quickly. But those futures vary, and your APR doesn't really measure all of those things when we're just looking at those test scores. But we want our kids to do well in these, and I think our teachers are doing a good job preparing our students. Probably one of the biggest challenges, and this was brought up by DESI statewide, was the attendance issue. It seemed like when we went through the pandemic, and I mentioned this before, that the culture of having kids in school regularly became an issue. And it became kind of a hardened issue. It's like if the kid decided they wanted to stay home, parents just let them stay home. And I know our principals have a lot of phone calls and connections they're doing with juvenile, and connections they're doing with parents and trying to encourage them in that way. But just to give you a snapshot, 83% of our kids are here 90% or greater. That sounds good, right? That means almost 1 in 5 kids is here less than 90% of the time. Well, that's 17%. I've kind of mentioned this before, and Kelly did the quick head math with me. I mean, you're going to have to miss more than 16 days of school to be less than 90%. So that basically means we've got about 1 in 5 kids missing more than 16 days of school. That makes our job exponentially more difficult, especially if we have the parent permission and then things, and the phone calls that our principals get that basically say, well, I'm giving them permission to leave. And we get a lot of that. So I'm just going to say it out loud, parents, we need your support. If we're going to score well in this APR, we're in this in a partnership. It's not just the school that's doing this. It's also what we're telling kids at home and saying that school is important, no matter what that student's future is. So it could be college, it could be a technical school, it could be working a business here in town. But we need to prepare them, and they need to be prepared. So that is the APR in a nutshell. I'm really proud of the fact that we are moving in the right direction. Obviously, we'd all like to move faster. If you look at the distribution that I put in there, I just put that in there earlier today. Statewide distribution, there's a little link there. Click that link and open that up. They show you a bar graph of just those numbers on the left. That's where all the APR scores in the state were. And you see the biggest bar is right dead center between 70 and 80%, 240 schools. If you look over to the right in 2023, there are 242 schools there. One key thing that you may notice is that schools in 2022, the blue bars, it says 41 were 90% or greater. You look over there on the right, and you see only 22 or 90% or greater. Well, what does that tell you? That tells you this is a difficult scoring guide. And so roughly half of those schools dropped off and went down into the other areas. So it's gonna be a constant maintenance thing to try to not work a system, but to respond to these measures. And in truth, this is an indicator of what we're doing to try to educate kids, you know. Somebody told me a story one time. They said, you know, anybody ever eaten a hot dog before? You ever had a hot dog? Anybody enjoy a hot dog? I had one at the concession stand a couple weeks ago, maybe right before break. Had mustard, put the relish on it, was a good hot dog. And you know, you think, what a great American food that you can enjoy. But there's not too, my dad used to work at a place called Comforts in St. Louis area when he was young. And he said, you know, I don't think I ever want to eat a hot dog again because they produce hot dogs there. You never want to watch how that's made. And if you look online, you can see those kind of things. Sometimes it's a little rough as it goes along, but the end product, going back to, you know, just using that as a metaphor between what we do and making hot dogs. Kids aren't hot dogs, but it should tell you that we want that end product to be something people enjoy, and we want the end product, the kid, to be a kid that's going to be successful in what their future is, you know, what they decide it to be. And, you know, we're not pigeonhole kids into anything. They're going to decide. They're going to be a part of that planning, and that's the ICAP process that our counselors do with them to try to help them develop a plan so that they're prepared for what they want to do. But I'd like to see us get into that 80% category or better within the next couple of years, and we're shooting for that. I think it's just going to kind of be the next step as we kind of move that direction. 90 is going to be hard. I'm just not going to lie. It's not easy like it used to be. And if you talk to anybody at DESE, they'll tell you the old APR system was broken. That's why it was rewritten. They wanted to make it more challenging, and it is. And you know, it's just going to be something that we're going to have to help kids do their best on tests. We're going to have to try to get them in school regularly. We need to keep our teachers trained and current, and both of our principals have done an excellent job keeping us on the cutting edge of a lot of things. We're not out of anything. We're connected to the RPDCs at University of Central Missouri, at Columbia. I don't know what Jason Culpepper does, but you know, he's about basketball, so we'll just let that go. But anyway, I think things are going the right direction. We have our teachers connected to good training, and I think that we developed that culture of coming to school more regularly. We developed that culture of, hey, tests are important. I think we're going to see these continue to go up. So that's just my 2 cents on it. What questions can I answer for you?
What changes do you see coming with the new president or with the new commissioner coming?
I was talking to, I'm trying to remember, I think she's going to be good for the state board and working with them. I think she's going to be an advocate for us. I don't know what ideas she'll be open to, but I was texting back and forth with some people who knew her. I'd have to go back to what they said about her, but I didn't see anything that made me think there's going to be this big upheaval.
Where's she coming from?
Southwest Missouri is what I remember. Let me look that up real quick. Since you asked me, Kelly, I'm gonna look it up.
Just not St. Louis County, right?
She was at Ava and West Plains as a superintendent. And two of my former superintendents both knew her. And she actually worked, which gave us a little pause, with another commissioner that will not be named, that no one really cared for, but she just seems like she's got some good experience in education and probably a better understanding of what goes on at the school level, so, not that Margie was a bad commissioner, I think she's a good commissioner too. This will probably get some more fine tuning, just like MSEP 5 did. That tends to happen, as people notice some things that don't quite reflect what's really going on in school, so. I haven't heard any big announcements, so Kelly, nothing yet. That was kind of an odd appointment though, because usually there's some kind of application process and it's put out there, and it looks like Governor Parson selected her, and she's gonna be the gal for the job.
Anybody else? All right, so moving on. Building administrator reports.
I get to go first. I put some data together for our academic intervention first semester of what it looked like, and some details. You have some charting there with a lot of numbers to look at that may not be real clear. So I'm gonna help clean that up a little bit for you. As far as the remainder of my report, we saw attendance go down during December. We had a lot of sickness going on, and so those numbers went down, but I was pleased with our honor rolls that came out, and I did have our parking spots that we awarded for attendance, and I think that those kids were really happy here in January to have the first 3 weeks parking real close to the building, if they're choosing to use that. Professional development on the report, I provided you with all of the slide presentations that were given at our January PD, with teaching strategies, instructional strategies with our DCI team, and then also we had 4 teachers attend a training at Jefferson City, engaging, managing, and motivating students who are unmotivated and disengaged. The picture that is on the front where you see Jolene talking to Trisha Bailey, you see Trisha with her head down, ignoring her, kind of took us through a scenario of what do you really do when a kid does put their head down and they are ignoring you. And sorry, that was my dad. What are they, what's going on then, and how do you manage that, and using some of those techniques. So our teachers, I tried to put a picture in there, our teachers actually having to work through that. I think Culpepper and Mr. Overbeck were the only 2 to not break the scenario, stuck through it. Zach did not break. Culpepper was trying to get him engaged and vice versa. So some of those strategies, you're gonna see that in there. We're gonna continue that engaging the unmotivated and disengaged. That will continue in February. So we did half of the training then, we've got the other half that we're gonna continue in February. We're gonna look at assessments and a curriculum. That's supposed to be next week, hopefully weather cooperates with us. Or math and English will come over here and look at their scores from last year to help see what we're gonna do moving forward, help with our testing, and then also alignment of curriculum, where it's taught, what's taught, how we're mastering those standards. We're gonna take a hard look at that evaluate data that I've been putting in your reports. It's here to the back. As well, you're gonna see the lines there for, now when you're looking at the data that looks like this chart right here, you're looking at everything, 6 through 11, okay? So that's not broken down by grade, it's 6 through 11, what math is doing and what English is doing. And then the breakdowns in percentages are below that in the circle graphs, where 52% of our kids in ELA seem to be mastering where they need to be, and we would expect them to be about there at this time of the year, because it's halfway through the year at 50% of the learning. And then math, we need to work some there. You'll see everybody is showing growth. Those were our December. We're showing growth in all grade levels. We've got 2 that we're working on, they had some decrease, but if you look at their November, all of their November scores had growth. And then on the back, I tried to include keys that I hadn't included before for you. It looks like this when you're looking at that page. That's each grade level key. So when you're looking at those percentages, I know when we talked way back in November, October, I said, you have to know the percentages to see where they're at, but I tried to give you that breakdown for every grade level, give you a little more each time. And the last page of my report there before we head into the presentation is our discipline data. and we're working on our PBS at the middle school and high school. And so one of the things we have to do is we have to look at that data and review it. Nancy Rogers came in the January. She was there at 7:30, met with the behavior team, very first thing, rattle out of the box, and talked with them about where we're going from here, implementing those lessons and the things that we need to work on. And if you look at that data for Tipton Middle School, you're going to see how many events were at the bottom. And then when you look up through how they're divided out, which you can see that tardies are our greatest problem. That's our biggest number, which creates those numbers where they're at. In the high school, you can see the same thing. Our biggest problem at the middle school and the high school is being late. Late to class, late to school, late. So that's one thing that we are working on. Probably as many parents out there, you probably saw an email come out from me that said this is what's gonna happen if you're late to school, or if you're late to class, this is the consequences. That's one way of addressing that. But also with engaging and motivating students, that was something we talked about, having something ready to go when they come in the classroom, that you're starting. I always had a bell ringer when my students came in. They knew that if they were in there, they needed to get started writing, because that's what we were gonna start with. So that's kind of a summary of my report. I tried to go through that pretty quickly for you. I do want to go back to the first page of my report, and I talk about our academic intervention. Miss Melton is in our library area. That's where she's set up at. I did ask her to attend when I thought we were all going to be in session, but tonight we're going to have her be at home. She sends her regards. What she does in there is very important to us, and it's critical to our successes and what we do each day that most people probably don't see or don't even know is going on, okay? So I want to talk about the successes first. 80% of our high school were on the honor roll. They were either on gold or silver, so 80% of our kids at school are above a 3.0 and being successful. In the middle school, we had 71% of our kids on the honor roll. So I tried to break it down by class for you and grade and give you some numbers with where we're at. I feel like those are pretty good numbers. I'm very pleased with those. Of course, everything can always be higher, but very pleased with the 80 and 71% of our kids are on the honor roll, okay? Up till 3 years ago, we did not have a uniform practice throughout the middle school and high school building. When I taught, there was not a uniform practice there of how a teacher addressed a late assignment. And that was one thing that we tried to do to unify us and make it better for parents to understand, better for the kids to understand. And just like we're using the PBS across the board, this is our practice for late assignments. And so students, it's not that, I think the phrase I've heard before is fire and forget, give them a 0 and move on. Ask a kid to do something they don't want to do it. They go, yeah, I'm not doing that. Just give them the 0. Okay, but did they really do it? Did they really learn? And if it's good enough to assign, it's good enough to do, and it's needed to be done. And so this is what we use to help them do that. It does get to a point where there is a 0 if they're not willing to do it, not willing to cooperate, not willing to try. But we do put that effort there and forward. Academic intervention. So the data that you're gonna look at now, Ms. Melton helped me with. I'm gonna give her credit for that because I had to have her to do the numbers. She is located in the library, and she had 667 support encounters, and I use the word encounters. That means that she had 667 times that she pulled students into the library to complete an assignment, fix assignment, help them with multiple assignments, address where, if they've had multiple classes, they might have been, I tried to think through, she and I did, why would she be pulling a student in there? They've been assigned to academic intervention. They've been absent for school and they're behind and they need some help getting forward. They're just not doing the assignments that they're being asked to do. So 667 times she pulled students in. Might have been the same student, not all 667 times, but multiple ones. After school services, we had 123 total students that we serviced in our after school. That goes from 3:20 to 4:20, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday after school. Miss Genches also stays on Mondays after school. Those numbers aren't in there. So Miss Genches, where she stays on Monday independently, with some students who come in there for tutoring. They're not a part of that. This is everything that happened in the library, and the tutors that are in there were Miss Genches, Miss Jeffcoat, and Miss Melton. The daily average during school is 15 is the average, 3 after school. I know those look low when you look at 667, but we're doing a lot of that during the day. Doing a lot of intervention during the day, which that's when we have them. That's the best time if we can get our hands there and help them jump in and do that. I know that there was one day she told me that she'd seen around 60 students in one day, pulling them in. There is one teacher that goes in and supports her and helps her during third period on a red day. So I've got 2 in there working at the same time, okay? Any questions so far? I know I'm rolling through pretty fast, but kind of give you a snapshot of it. Tier 3, this is what we're into right now, is Jan term. These are students who've failed courses. So we had a total of 35 students who failed 1 or more courses, 20 in the high school, 15 in the middle school. Those are the percentages at each building level. Total number of students for the entire middle school, high school that are gonna need to reclaim credit is 11%. January term, out of the 20 that need to reclaim credit, there are 18 that are going to be able to claim that credit. The reason that the others cannot claim that is because they scored below a 40% in the class. If you score below a 40% as your semester grade, then you're not allowed to reclaim that. You have to retake the course. So if you have less than a 40, if you have a 38 in Algebra 1, you're retaking Algebra 1 next fall. That's how it works. The teachers worked with me and Mr. Culpepper to establish that percentage number. Our first year we did it, we just did reclaim. You fail the class, you reclaim. And we realized a little hitch in that we needed to fix was there needed to be a percentage level. There's only so many hours in Jan term that we have, and they need to have at least 40% to reclaim that. So that's where you see that 90%. In the middle school, there's only 13 that are going to be reclaiming out of the 15, are recovering those credits. So when I talk about that down at the bottom, I have non-core. The 2 that are not reclaiming because their percentages were below are not in core areas, math, science, English, history, or reading. They're in an elective class like an Ag Explo or a art or a music or some sort of non-core math, science, English, history, reading. At the high school, it's a 1-to-1. I have some students who are not reclaiming because they're not able to because of the percentage, and then it's a balance with the number of students that are opting not to. Okay, they're saying, yeah, I'm not doing that because they don't need it for graduation. If it's needed for graduation, I encourage them to do it. Even if it's not needed for graduation, I encourage them to do that. But there are some that parents do just say, no, we're not, they don't need it to graduate, we're not doing that. We're gonna take a different class. Or they've switched out of that class and went to a different class, okay? Any questions so far? Okay, so we have 31 students when we do get back in session that will be doing Jan term. We were supposed to start that on Monday, but we didn't do that on Monday, everybody went home. So tomorrow we'll see what things look like. Any days that we miss, I only allow it to go on for 19 days, which is about 31 hours I figured out, and there's around 40 class periods in first semester, so it's about that ratio with the 40% that makes it equal out. They should be able to get in there, get it done. If a student has a 56%, they're gonna have a little less work to do than a kid who had a 41%. They're gonna have some more standards that they need to master. All of this is developed by our teachers because they know what that student was able to do, what that student did master and didn't master, what they needed to do. It's not an outside source, doesn't cost us an exorbitant, I'm gonna say it like that, exorbitant amount of money. We're paying some computer program to run them completely back through it. This is managed with our teachers, and our teachers, we can walk to them and say, hey, this is what they've done so far. How does this look to you? What else do we need to do with them? We have teachers who will pop in and help and say, hey, let me come in here and give them some guides, and then they can master it and move on. Because you can't it's hard to move forward if you don't have the skills that you're supposed to gain from the first semester. Yes,
Just
ma'am.
a quick question. On this, is any of this that they can take home and do as well in return? This has to be done at
We do it all
school?
there.
Okay.
We do it all there. I've had that question come across a couple different times, but we wanna make sure that they're mastering that standards. And if they've already struggled with it, we wanna have people in place to help them. The first week that we started in, there's 3 teachers in there doing that. And then as the numbers decrease, and the student numbers decrease, then some of my intervention support during Jan term there'll be 2 in there or 1 in there, depending on what it is. And they try to arrange it. I have a couple students who are like, I have a job. It's a matter of a job. I gotta, I can't stay. And I'm like, okay, well, we need to figure this out because I need you to stay. And so there's, they've had to have some conversations with their employers of like, hey, I gotta get school taken care of. And then I said, I'm good with you say, Ms. Nutter, I'll stay from 3:20 to 4:20, or 4:30, but then I need to be at my job by 4:45. We get that figured out. We do work with them on that. Any other questions?
On your middle school numbers, are those 6th, 7th, 8th? I know that's,
6, 7, 8.
I know that's the width, but is it more 6th graders that are having a hard time adjusting, or?
No,
Pretty scattered.
Okay.
yeah, it was pretty balanced when I figured
Same
the
way with high
numbers.
school, it's not freshmen or.
Maybe say 8th grade might be the highest in the Fs.
More, I have the papers right there. I would say that he's correct on that, but they were pretty balanced.
Yeah.
What we see, heavier are the courses. And at this time, I'm gonna keep that, we can look at that or talk about that separately, but, we'll see some courses that are a little heavier than the other ones when I looked at the numbers. Okay?
I have a question real quick.
Yes, sir.
How did you guys determine the 40% to reclaim credit?
Based off the hours that they have to do it during Jan term, and if they have less than 40%, how can they take almost, if they only got, let's say, 30% in that whole entire semester, how can they get that much knowledge in that short period of time?
They've got to
After
relearn.
school every day for 19
70%.
days, they've got to master a lot of skills that they didn't do during the entire first semester. So there needed to be some type of number that had a divide of like saying, if they had 40%, we gotta get those skills that they had and get them up to passing.
So at that 40%, they are mastering the class, I guess
No,
is what I'm
They
asking.
have to go through and complete the standards, so a kid has a 41%, Craig, the teacher who teaches that class is gonna look through the assignments that were given and the standards that child did or did not master, and then that teacher is responsible for looking at the standards that specific child needs. Because I might master 41% and it was I missed these 7 standards over here. You had 41%, you mastered these other 6 standards over here. Well, I'm gonna need a little bit different in Jan term than you are. And then there's the student who had a 58%. They're not gonna need as many standards as the kid that had the 41. So that's why it's real important to me that our teachers manage and control that, because they know the kids and they know what they need to be successful. They also should know the priority standards that they need to know for our end of course exams and our tests that we have to take in our championship, which is in April, which is what I'm digging at, our championship. Okay? Any other questions on that?
So all core classes, no elective, makeup?
Yes, we're making up electives as well.
Yeah.
Right, if they're below a 40%, or if they're above the 40% and even in a non-elective, or in an elective class or vocational class, we're still gonna have them do that. I do have parents call from time to time, not very often, that call and say, yeah, they're not gonna do that. And generally, that's at the senior level, where they say, is this class a class needed for graduation? Are they gonna need it to graduate? And then we have those conversations. I have had a few in the middle school, not this year, but in the past say, yeah, they're not gonna make that up. Okay, well, this is what happens if they choose not to. These are the steps and the processes that happen because of that. And so I did have one of those one conversation, but it was with the child of like, well, what if I don't do it? I said, well, this is what we're gonna have to do if you choose not to do that. But you go home and talk to your mom and dad and let's visit about it. So lots of conversations. So any other questions?
I do have another one. This one baffles me till no end.
Okay.
70% on a late assignment? Can you go back to that
Yep.
slide, please?
Yep. Do you want me to walk you through it?
So if I'm in your English class and I don't turn in a paper when you say it's due,
Mhm.
I can turn it in a week later?
No. here's how this works. You're in my English class and I assign you a essay to write and you don't turn it in. And I say, Craig, I really need you to write that essay. It's of course, you learn those standards. And I need you to finish that essay and I'm gonna need you to turn it in to me tomorrow morning because you've had enough time to do it. That's when I need it completed by, okay? You don't turn it in to me the next morning, 8 o'clock. I see you in the hallway, you don't turn it in. You wave, you say hi, you're nice. You walk on. I say, hey, Craig, you didn't turn in that essay to me. I needed it this morning because I gotta get my grades taken care of and put on here and get your essay graded and give you feedback. And you go, yeah, Ms. Metter, I'm not doing that. I say, okay, just so you know, you've chosen not to do that with me. Me as the teacher, I've made an arrangement with you to get it done. I'm gonna make an assignment to you for academic intervention. And academic intervention happens after school. Which day works best for you, Craig? And you go, Ms. Metter, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not going to academic intervention. I said, okay, well, I'm still gonna assign it because Mrs. Metter, the principal, expects me to assign it and follow through. So you are gonna show up on the list for Mrs. Melton to pull you in to complete this essay. Tuesday comes, Wednesday comes, whichever day we decide was gonna work best. You don't show up for academic intervention, then it becomes a 0. But if I give it to you and you show up at 8 o'clock in the morning and you say, Mrs. Metter, thank you for giving me the opportunity to complete the essay. It's not the greatest thing, but I got it. Then the most that I'm gonna give you on that assignment is a 70%. I'm not gonna give you 100, but I'm gonna give you up to a 7. But I'm also not gonna give you a 0 for being late because my goal is that you do it. I want you to do the work versus just letting it go. I'm giving you a 0. Now,
I can still get 70% if I go to academic
Yes.
intervention and do it?
Mhm.
So that buys me another day or 2.
if you're assigned, if you show up to the assigned time, and me as the teacher, I have to make that arrangement with you. And then when I put it on the chart for academic intervention, Miss Melton will either have you'll be there during the evening and come in and she'll let the teachers know and say, hey, this kid, Craig didn't show up, Mrs. Metter. And I say, okay, and then I go back to my grade book and I put it in as a 0. So the goal is not to just, okay, you didn't do it, 0, move on. Because that's what we ran into a lot of. We ran into a lot of just, don't do it. Yeah, I'm not gonna do it, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. The goal is for someone to do their job, to not just move on. We want them to do the work that we assign.
How does you think that would impact your graduation rates if you just continue to hand out zeros and?
I don't think I think our numbers on our tier 3 intervention, this list right over here, you would see that go up through the roof because that's what used to happen and it was through the roof before.
It was always worse for middle school because it's just disorganized kids. Once they get to high school, those kids kind of get a little bit more motivated. It's the middle school kids, that 70% thing really helps out a lot because it just doesn't allow them just to, be forgotten about. You got a 0, all right, move on to the next day. Because those kids, they're like, that's okay. 0 is not that bad. Even though you did the power of 0 lesson in every class whenever you were a teacher and showed them how powerful 1 0 is to their grade, it's a lot easier just to not do it and get a 0 than it is to actually make them follow through even though they only get a 7%.
You're gonna play, you're gonna pay, is fine. That just seems like, we have a teacher sitting in the back. If she tells me I have an assignment due on Wednesday, that's what she means. It's on Wednesday. Not just, well, Miss Simon, I didn't have time to do it. Well, okay, Craig, you got till the next day.
But
And I can
each
still
teacher has
I can
the,
still get 70%. That just seems like a lot. 'Cause
each
then when
teacher
you go
has
into
the,
like National Honor Society, that impacts everything. I get what you're trying to do, but it just floors me. I guess from the old school, like when you were told to do something, you do it.
Well, a 70 would be 100, though, if I'm understanding.
Correct.
right, they would get no higher than 70.
Yeah, so if
Yeah.
you
If
got-
That's
they got,
gonna
if they
impact
got
their
a
grade.
70% on their 70%,
Yeah.
they're down there at a 50.
They're gonna get no higher than that. They can,
Right.
it'll reduce from that. That's where the starting point is.
Is it the same assignment, or the teacher's gotta give them a different assignment?
No, same.
That's my question.
Yeah.
I mean, what you got going's working, I seen that 70%, and I'm like, why does anybody do homework? But now I get it.
Well, there are some that do it and go for the 100, but there are others that, I mean, we're pulling on them to get them to do this. So, you know, everybody goes home to a different household.
Right,
Every
nothing-
parent
I
has
mean-
different expectations. I guess, I'm not debating back with you, but just, if you don't pass your driver's test, do you never get your driver's lessons? Or do you get another chance to take it?
I mean, yes, you get another chance to
Okay.
take it.
So if you miss paying your electric bill, do you get a chance to pay it at some point?
With a penalty, yes.
With a penalty. So if you think about those life situations where you're going to have to probably get a driver's license,
Right.
I think, at some point,
But I
maybe
mean,
not.
another way
And
to
same
look
thing
at
with
it,
your
though-
electric. At some point, hopefully, we're gonna get that electric back on.
Another way to look at it though,
Yeah.
is if a teacher tells you that assignment's due, or your boss tells you you have to be at work at 5:30, then that's what you do.
Yes, and you know what? We're a learning institution where we're trying to teach them those skills. And
Right, but I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, what you're doing's working. I mean, you guys are the teachers and administrators, it just, I don't know.
One thing it's trying to do is helping detour that not doing the assignment and having to come after school again to do the same assignment. Hopefully they're rerouting
the
them.
after school
Yeah,
is,
so they're
right,
having
the
to.
goal is.
And
there's-
not on their terms, on teacher terms.
Correct. Thank you.
And I would think
And-
that I don't know how you incentivize a kid, if you're not gonna give them anything, then I don't know how you get them to do it. And then the point of doing it is to learn it.
You don't?
Well, that's the issue.
I understand that's the point, but you can't make somebody do something. I mean, you can't sit in that chair and he can't sit in that chair. No one in here can make me do something. So if a child just goes off the rails and doesn't wanna do it,
Then they end up
they're
at the
not
zero.
gonna do it.
Yeah. And
I
we have
don't know
some,
if it's
But I
always
mean-
about going off the rails though, because I think Jason talked about, I noticed it with our kids too, with like going from one school to the next. So like a big change in the structure of the way the school would be.
I could
with
understand that.
Classes, and they're disorganized and they're not used to the way that things are.
Sure, but I mean, if you're talking about just kids not, same ones not wanting to do their homework.
so that's where we go to the next slide.
I do have a question about this, by the way.
You bet. This
Was
one,
it that kid that also doesn't, that's a repeat offender on the 70% thing, they're not getting 100% on that 70. So
Right.
they're
But I
they're
mean-
they're getting a
63.
50% on their 70, so they're down there in the F. So they're going into tier 2, tier 3 anyway. So you know this is more for like your kids that have real life problems, just like employees do. You know, just like if you have an employee show up at 7:35 and they're supposed to be there at 7:30. You know, it's similar to that. And most of the kids, especially in high school, you know, you don't have a lot of kids that are repeat offenders on the 70% unless they're also getting an F in the class. The kids that are, you know, really, you know, just they had a ball game and forgot to do their English paper, you know, and then they get their punishment of 30% chopped off.
I think there's another question.
Well, yeah, it's kind of related to this. It's more about, we talked about before the email, with the time at night when the emails come.
Oh, gosh.
6.
Yeah, so, you know, you get parents like Jason talked about, you know, kids that are unorganized, and especially like a middle school area. Is there any sort of like standard or expectation on how quickly grades are entered in for parents that are trying to follow up to make sure? Because that's what happens. If I see something, I'm like, well, what the heck? You got a 0 out of 15 on this. Did you not do it? Did you not turn it in? And sometimes that, like lately, like I got on to my daughter the other day, and she's like, it's not due until next week. It's just pre-entered in, so I could see how that I could misinterpret that and get onto them when I shouldn't. So I didn't know if there's some sort of like standard.
Expectation.
Yeah.
So there's two actually that I can talk to you about on that. The first one is that we ask teachers to enter grades at least every 4 class periods. That there needs to be something in the grade book every 4 class periods. And then the second one is that when you make an assignment, that that grade should go in. If a student does not turn that in, so Craig doesn't turn his essay in to me, and I go to enter grades that day for everybody else, and I told him, I need that by tomorrow morning. That's when I expect you to bring it to me, Craig. That's the agreement with me and you. And he doesn't, when I go ahead that night and grade everybody else's the night before, I'm gonna go in his and put missing. And that's gonna calculate as a 0. And then over in the comments section, I expect the teachers to put in missing, assignment is to be turned in at 8 a.m. or assignment is to be presented on Tuesday during win time or whenever. But I expect them to go ahead and put that missing in so that you all as parents know if they don't complete this, it's already going to calculate as a 0 and it is going to, I mean, you're not going to see a new effect on their grade. What we had in the past that would happen, and one of the reasons we asked them to do that, is we would have a teacher who would give them extended time. This is when we were out without being uniform. They would give them extended time, and it would get to the end of the quarter and they hadn't turned anything in and there weren't any grades in there because the student hadn't turned anything in, the teacher hadn't reported anything because nothing was there, and then they go through and put a bunch of 0s in. And so that student, to that parent's perception, what we found would look like they were receiving a B or an A or C or whatever, and then boom, at quarter it went to an F. Why did it go to an F all of a sudden? Well, they had 8 missing assignments. Well, we didn't know that. We wish we didn't know that. So that when we put that uniform in, that was another piece that we put in place that said, when you assign it and you grade it, if it's not there, it needs to be missing. You can put in missing and it'll calculate it as a 0. The computer system does that.
Yeah, because I even always interpreted it to be whenever it was entered in as the time that it was graded, and that isn't necessarily true in the past, I guess.
One of the teachers I talked to here at the beginning of this semester said one of the things that they were going to make an adjustment. They were a teacher who would get the assignments, grade them all, figure out who was missing, and then put it in. And they were running into this, what you were talking about, like, why, if I was a parent, I'd have known that. And so they started with a check off, like, the papers are here, check, 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 check. I have everybody's. Whose do I not have? Goes right over, puts in missing. It's automatically going to go, it's missing. So then that way at night you should know. And then the child can say, I know I didn't do it, and I got to have it to my better by 8 o'clock. You know, Greg's saying, I got to get my essay done tonight. So, okay? No video games.
And I think some of those false missing assignments you were talking about is just like teachers getting ahead. Like they got the assignment, so they went ahead and put it in the grade book. And then they just maybe weren't fully aware how the grade system worked.
I was like, how do you get 0 on this already? And she's like, well, it's not due till next week. Look at the date.
Probably
I'm like,
assigned it that day, so they
Sorry.
added the grade book and calculated it. Just not know.
And there are some new teachers who are figuring out that grading system of how to balance it, you know, and how it works. It is a new teacher finding that stride.
Speaking of technology, we'll have a whole new reporting system going into 24-25 because our current system is going down the tubes, so they're not going to support it anymore, and we had to get bid on that a while back, so that'll be a new learning curve for us on how things go out, what it looks like, and a lot of training for teachers and administrators.
The last piece of support services that Ms. Melton helps with there for us, one is behavior support. Mr. Culpepper and I try to use classroom detention to start with when we have behavior situations that are kind of within one classroom. We're seeing those same behaviors from that specific student coming from a specific classroom. We'll do what's called a classroom detention. They may serve that time frame in our office, or if we know that they're behind on assignments or they need support or help, we'll send them to the library area with Ms. Melton to get that cleaned up. We'll also use what's called structured day that goes in there, trying to work with students who maybe aren't being successful all day long. We'll modify their schedule so they'll be in there for part of the day. She also takes care of in-school suspension for us at the same time that she's doing all this other for us. Unless we get our numbers up of 2 or 3, if we have more than that in ISS, then we will get a person in to help us with ISS specifically. But if we're down to just one student in there, which doesn't happen all the time, it's a rarity, I would say, we use it for that as well. One of the things that I really like about having Ms. Melton in that place is she had special services education experience where she worked with special students who needed that extra help and extra support in reading, math. So when she has students come through and she's working with them one-on-one, she sometimes notices things that might have gotten missed in different places, or we get a new student into the school and they maybe don't have an IEP, or they don't have a 504, and she kind of catches up with something of like, they're really struggling with reading, or when I read it to them, they understand, but when they have to read it on their own, they don't. And so she's able to do some of those referrals. There's also some things that get shared with her that get some students some emotional help and support that they may need there. That happens through that as well. The last piece that goes on in that library that's all redone and recreated is where most all of our dual credit classes are located. And then our launch courses, so students who are taking online courses are also located in there. If you go in there, you're gonna see a lot going on, because there is a lot going on in that one room for support and help, okay? She does have a few tutors that are cadet teachers that work with her throughout the day while she's in there to help students as well. Any questions? I had a lot of information.
Busy woman.
Yes, she is. So we try to treat her well and take care of her. Okay? Any other questions?
Nope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for your questions. It helps me get more ideas and know what you're thinking. You guys want to talk now?
I yield my time.
Sorry.
We also, piggybacking off of her, had our PDC here on January 2nd to focus on math. We've spent a lot of time the last year and a half with letters training and focusing on literacy. And so we're trying to also focus and share some time with math instruction. They focus on some different instructional practices we'd like to put in place, but also how to move our students to proficient advanced on the MAP test. Hannah Sanders is our title math teacher for K-8, and she has been very helpful for us and leading some instruction for teachers as well. We ended the semester with our holiday concert. Mrs. Wilson and the students did a great job being prepared. We had our PBS Christmas store where students got to spend some money, or their fake behavior bucks. We had some volunteers come in. They did a great job wrapping presents for our students. It's always like the highlight of our year, isn't it, Mr. Kohler?
Yes, ma'am.
Best part. PTO just purchased 2 new in-ground basketball goals for our playground, and so when the weather improves, they'll be getting those installed. And then one big thing, how we ended our semester was our K through 5 iReady diagnostic tests. Those students will take that at the beginning of the year, middle of the year, and then also at the end of the year. So our second test was just taken, and we saw some big growth points. Some of those were 28% of our students were 2 or more grade levels below in math. After middle of the year, we have only 12% remaining in that group. And another one in reading, only 19% of students were at or above grade level at the beginning of the year. After our middle of the year assessment, we have 42% of the students at or above grade level. So big growths on both of those. Just one other thing is we have a new requirement from DESE, and I think I've talked about it a little bit. With our letters training, we also have to do reading success plans for every student K3. We've expanded that and decided if we have all these kids in our building, we're gonna go ahead and do it K5 and just make sure students are where they need to be. And that's a huge endeavor, and we've had a lot of hands working on those. Amanda Simon, Stacy Crane, Roxanne, Hannah is title math, but she's also got her hands in there helping, and we just sent our second ones home. I think we went from 65 the first round down to 54, was that right, Amanda? 74 to 54, so we've seen growth and improvement for our students, and so less reading success plans for students is a good thing. But just pinpointing the things that they need and making sure we're providing the right interventions.
Nice. Does anybody have anything? Miss Ashley? And you got Jason's up next if he's.
So we have FBLA, FFA, DECA, all starting their district competitions. FFA will start all their spring competitions on February 24th when they kick off at Eldon. FBLA and DECA are both district competitions are February 1st and 2nd. Districts for all winter sports start in February with wrestling, shows location for girls and boys. And then girls basketball is here, boys basketball is at Smithton. Conference tournament for high school is the very last week of January into that first weekend of February on the 3rd. And
outside that, winter sports are rolling smooth, and you guys have the senior nights there listed for wrestling on the 24th, basketball on the 6th for basketball and cheer, and then the Tipton Archery Tournament is this Saturday. We'll see how that works out with the snow that we have coming in, and then court warming's on the 9th versus Smithton, and then I also put a list there that spring schedules are all set and ready with officials assigned and everything like that.
Anybody have anything for Jason? No? Okay, moving on, Nancy, everybody's got Nancy's report. Oh, no. So moving on to new business. Everybody needs to look at this language to be sure it is clear, to the point. Because this is what will go on the ballot.
Didn't we decide that we're gonna ask for the dollar, but if need be, once we get everything, we don't have to go the full dollar, is that right?
Right, and if you listen to that, webinar that I sent to your email, probably should have sent you a text there to let you know it's there as well. You can listen to all the variables that are going on at the state level and not really knowing if they're gonna make any kind of adjustment to the state adequacy target at all. It's just a lot of politicking and electioneering and going into filibusters because I'm running for this other office. I encourage you to listen to it. It's about 38 minutes long. If you're on a drive or something and headed to a job site or doing something, just listen to what's going on at our General Assembly. I don't know if we're gonna be able to rely on them, but maybe they do come through a little bit. Maybe they do renew the 38K teaching grant. It's just really not clear. And this will give us some leeway. It says up to $1. That means I can do some math and figure out just where we need to be. We're also, guys, we're hiring people before we really have set our tax levy. And that's another problem because we're doing all of our hires, we're preparing for all our kids, we're giving raises, we're doing everything we're supposed to do, and we still don't know, you know, what our assessed valuations get, what we do. We don't know how much we're gonna bring in the local tax levy. We don't necessarily know what the state's going to do or not until the end of June or maybe July. It's just a bad way to run school business. And we wanna keep this commitment to our teachers and our support staff. And we're about $250,000 deficit spending right now. Well, you continue to operate those salary schedules, it just grows. So I'm hoping the state comes through and we don't have to go all the way up to $1, but we need to ask the community for what we do need to keep our salaries competitive. I just came from the new conference meeting, and at least 3 of those school districts and the 8 that are sitting there, us being one, is already talking about adding another 1,000 or 2 on top of their salary schedule. I mean, we're playing catch up, and if you listen to that webinar, that link, I don't know if any of you listened to that yet, I mean, you'll hear at some point, they believe the state is going to make it mandatory that we move teacher salaries to 38K and not give us any help. So it is gonna fall to local taxpayers at some point. And we're just not in that position to be able to keep up without addressing our operating levy, which is second to the lowest in 17 schools in the mid-Missouri area of near like size that are comparable. You know, in the past, this board had nothing to do with this, but in the past, we built the elementary, we made improvements to the school. When I say we, I mean the school district. And the way the community chose to do that in the late 90s, early 2000s, was to go into debt, just like you get a home equity loan. And that's issuing bonds. But then that bond levy has to go up because that's the way the community decided to do that. And so it's $1.08. And then the operating levy is $2.93. Well, $2.93 is second to the lowest for operating. That's just every year, that's raises, that's fixing the driveway, that's doing all the things you have to do to have school. That's paying football coach, that's buying basketballs, that's buying textbooks, that's buying computers, that's doing all the things you have to do to have school. So if we're second to the lowest in our area of mid-Missouri and like-sized schools in our former conference and our current conference, I mean, we're going to lose teachers because there are other opportunities for them. And, you know, we've talked to enough teachers. We're gonna go through hiring season. We're getting ready to go through hiring season again. This board moved that salary schedule to make it competitive, and we need to keep it competitive. We need to fund it. We need the community to help us to do that, or the state, or a combination of both. And we've made some cutbacks already. We cut probably close to $100,000, and that was people and programs. We cut an entire fax program. We cut 2 people last year. So we're making cuts. But then we're also facing, I just talked to OSBA, which is our insurance provider. We're looking at a single digit, maybe around 5%-ish or more on our health insurance going up. That's not terrible, because I've seen a lot worse. So we're with the right company. We bid that right. But now I'm getting ready to issue our bus services, our transportation bid, to see how that's gonna come back. You know, so, and I can guarantee you, transportation services, they're seeing that we're getting 75% this year of our allowable costs, which is all we can get, and that's never been done for like 15, 16, 17 years. Used to be 20% we get, and now they're giving us what they should be giving us by statute. I know transportation companies are looking at it and saying, hey, we should be asking for more from this little school district over here that we service, or all of our school districts. So they're writing their bids to their advantage, and you know, I talked to a bus driver in Versailles, and they're paying those drivers $22 an hour, plus benefits. I mean, it's real money, and it costs a lot to operate a school and do what we do. I've also had some discussions and thinking, you know, districts that are near us, and I won't call them out, I've talked to another board member at another school district nearby, and said, you know, it's not out of the question to start thinking about consolidation on our own. You know, thinking about smaller districts that are also struggling, that are substantially lower than us, but nearby, and combining forces in some way. Because if we're gonna provide, you know, we just went through the APR and all the things they're asking us to do, they're asking us to do the same things that they're asking large St. Louis or Springfield or Sedalia, every other big school to do. You know, we're having to do it on a tight budget, and that's hard. So, we don't wanna stick up our local taxpayer any more than we need to. But we can't lose all of our teachers either, because they're going down the road to California, or they're going down the road to New Bloomfield, or they're going to Harrisburg, or somewhere, or to Stover. If we keep seeing that kind of flight going on, I don't know how we'll ever have enough certified teachers here. But, you know, I don't think teachers go into it to be rich. That they don't wanna go out and worry all the time, and they don't wanna watch a teacher next door making 5-10 grand more than them either. So we need to be comparable and competitive. And we will continue to go through that analysis of what is the prevailing wage for a teacher in mid-Missouri? What is that prevailing wage? What puts us in the zone where people don't skip us over? Because they say, well, Tipton pays so little, well, then I don't wanna work there. You know? Let me ask my principals this, I'll put you on the spot here. When you guys are interviewing people and trying to bring them in, do you have any what percentage of applicants ask you what we pay?
100%.
There you go. Everyone.
And there was a big difference last year from the beginning of hiring season, when we hadn't approved the new salary increase, to people being seriously making considerations till, yes, we approved it, and then coming back and saying, okay, I'll work there, because that's now comparable to other places I could go to.
So it made a big difference.
A big difference.
Yeah. And we'll probably never compete with Sedalia or California, but we're close now. We're not so far away. And also, I think the climate and culture of our building sometimes can be a lot better than the medium of the large-sized school districts. Did we hear any of that, guys, at all?
Yeah, we had people jumping from bigger school districts to come to Tipton and like-sized schools because there's less problems and behaviors and different things that go on in smaller schools.
Yeah. So we do have that to our advantage as well. Okay.
What's everybody think of this language?
Did you ever see what Cole Camp's language looked like, their ballot?
It's almost the same. Yep. I went through all their materials and, looked at their campaign and how they were talking about different things, and I said, that's the same with us.
What will, I'm sorry, guys, I wasn't here last month, what will a dollar generate for us?
$600,000 approximately. Now, they ran a 50-cent one, but it's gonna generate $400,000 for them.
Is their assessed valuation higher?
Yes, I think that's what it is. I'd have to go back and look, Kelly. There's a chart I put together for you, yeah. So, I mean, South Callaway can run on 275 with no problem.
Self-funded.
Yeah, I mean, they've got the power plant right there, and they've got plenty down there to help them. Lynn can as well. They've got an assessed valuation, they don't have that many more kids than we do. But, RAV and, you know, what it is, the value of all the property and the land and the houses and everything else here, just hasn't been going up much, guys. It's 0.9% last year. Here's the good thing, as AV goes up, we can assess less. We can go down, you know. And as our debt goes down, we can also assess a less debt service levy too. You know, this might be a turning point here. If our levy operating side can get adjusted, or we can have the power to adjust it as needed, to stay competitive, we might actually start paying our debts down to the point where that levy continues to fall and we get out of debt. Now, that would be interesting, right? And then what do you do? But, you know, this may be the first step toward that. And I've talked to some people in town that have said, why are we in debt? And I go back through the history, just like I did with you just a minute ago, or I pulled one sheet that's on my wall and say, well, here's when this was done. Here's when this was done. This is how much it was for. There's one that was approved. There's one that wasn't. You know, just walk them through it. You know, it's when you're at a struggle for cash to get these projects done. I know you guys know this, but I'm doing it probably for the benefit of Facebook. You go get loans, you get bonds, you issue bonds. So, you know, we don't have any big building projects in mind, do we? Well, we're talking about competitive and comparable salaries, for districts that are near our size in Missouri. That's what we're talking about. And what the only other option that can come out of this is, you know, we're gonna have to have more severe cuts. We're gonna have to do more significant cuts. And that's not gonna help our school at all. That's just a downward slide.
So do we need to approve this language?
You have to approve that language. We need a motion to approve the ballot language. You've got some paperwork to sign with Amy after it's over, but approved.
Because I mean, this is huge. Because I mean, if we don't have certified teachers, what do you got? Your school's gonna go downhill quick. I mean, this isn't a want. We need this. It's not a want. I mean, if we're gonna keep highly qualified people in teaching at our school, we need this, just so Facebook knows. I mean, also, we gotta have it.
And I think it's also important too, thinking about, you know, Roxanne lives here in town. She's filming right now. We want more people to stay here, live here, teach here, build homes here, raise their kids here. And if we can make our salary competitive, Ashley pointed out, we got people leaving the districts that have the problems. If we can keep keeping the problems down and having things like the intervention program that Ms. Metters put together and worked on and polished, and say, hey, we're not gonna let our kids fall behind, and pay attention to our APR and say, hey, what are our end results and kids being successful? Well, we're building our community too, as one of the biggest employers in town. And that's important. We want people to stay.
Well, I think the language is specific enough to the reason we're running it now. I guess I could say it that way.
It's pretty straightforward.
Well, yeah, I mean, you run into, not to complicate things, but I mean, the issue is, we don't have big buildings planned or anything like that, like we talked about, but we have to maintain what we have,
Yes,
and that's
we do.
that's not cheap.
No.
So there's a lot of reasons why I think we have this split up the way it is now, and you know, you look at the structure of that and how that will play out in the future, and it's hard to know.
And I think we've done a good job in our conversations in directing and there was a lot of extra money that came in through the federal government, through ESSER, the COVID money. We were able to do a real balancing act between increasing our salaries, rewarding our staff, faculty and staff, but also fixing some things. Now, we didn't go out and pave all the parking lots, but we used gravel, we did the best we could, because we didn't wanna bite off too much. We had some fortunate things happen, or unfortunate, I don't know, when our fences blew down, and, you know, the insurance covered most of that. I think it was Bo's insurance, not really. But we had that happen, but then we kind of added some little pieces to make it better, so we fixed that. We had the tuck pointing done for about $60,000, so we did transfer some money over there that came in through federal one-time money. That money's gone. It's gone this year. And we're not gonna be able to do things like that. We put the safety mats in the gym. You know, a lot of people didn't realize that in the elementary gym, the kids were running so hard, we had 2 arms broken. I mean, that's for a reason. And if you don't think our basketball players play hard, go watch a game, you know, that's the truth. You know, we want kids to be safe, and of course, we had to put the big cardinal on the wall, because Coach Culpepper said we had to. No, not really. But those are commercial mats. The other ones we had were falling apart, you know, the stuffing was coming out of them. That's probably just because we play hard. But I think we've been good stewards of what has come through to spend money on kids, period. That's all it's for. When this money comes in, it's not to bank it, it's to spend it on kids where we need it. And now we're trying to keep the teachers in this building, and that's important.
I'll make a motion to approve the ballot levy language for the April 2nd, 2024 ballot.
Motion by Diggs.
Second,
Who said that?
I did.
Seconded by Stephanie, all in favor? 7-0.
All right, I make a motion to move us in executive session pursuant to 610.021 to discuss 13.
We have,
We got do we need anyone else or just you?
it'd be just me tonight.
All right, so we got a motion by Bo,
Second.
seconded by Diggs. Bo,
Yes.
Diggs,
Yes.
Ashley,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes, sir.
Amanda,
Yes.
Steph,
Yes.
myself, yes, 7-0. And thank you all for coming.